Hey everybody, this is Keith Salmon from Keith Salmon Coaching and home of the Million Dollar Story Method. Today we have another in the series of the Million Dollar Story series where we look for million dollar stories. I think that everyone's got a million dollar story and this is certainly one of them. I'm very privileged to have Paul Joseph and Ann Brammer on today. And we're going to talk about Paul's vision project and his dream project called the Lee House in Maysville, Kentucky. Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Ann.
Keith.
Morning, Ann.
Hi, Keith.
Good to have you on board. So
we're glad to be on board.
Awesome. So right now, just in terms of logistics, I'm in Santa Monica, California. Paul is in West Los Angeles, California, and Ann is back in Maysville, Kentucky, at the Lee House. So we are. Paul's a good friend and a colleague, and I have not had the privilege of meeting Ann yet. Ann is taking care of the Lee House right now, and the Lee House is very historical. And what the story, my angle on all the stories is how these things even happen. How does someone like Paul end up finding the Lee House, 1789 vintage? How does that happen? And so why don't I let you introduce how that dream came about, Paul. Tell us just a little bit about how you even came across and what are you doing owning the Lee House?
It was certainly never planned. It sort of happened organically. My wife, Valda, was from Maysville. And every year after we had children, we'd always go back and visit, and we'd take the kids to visit the grandparents there. And during the spare time, whenever there was any, I'd go fishing a little bit in the early trips, and that was kind of the pastime. It was maybe a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and then at some point, the fishing wasn't very good to me. I mean, more guys did better than I did with the fishing stuff. I just ended up needing something else to do, so I started to dabble in real estate. And somehow I ran across this building that I was attracted to because of a lot of different things about it. Almost instantaneously when I saw it, I knew it was very old. I didn't know much about the history, but as I started to research it, I found that it was just a fabulous old building with history that goes way back to the time this country was first discovered. And the people that passed through was just made it all that much more of an interesting building to someday have the privilege of working on and restoring. So that's kind of how it all started.
Well, great. So like, I say 1789, the years when the country was just starting to get going, and people like. Tell us a few of the people. I know like Daniel Boone was one of those people, those legendary people that came through.
Sure. I mean, back back in the day before the Lee House was developed, or right around the time it was being developed, a lot of the area in Maysville or in that region was basically undeveloped, and there were frontiersmen, which were the only people that were able to successfully kind of go into the wilderness and make it back into their new civilization. And Daniel Boone, Simon Kenton were a couple of the well-known frontiersmen who were able to explore those areas and help settlers who were coming from Europe, across the Atlantic, down in the Florida Panhandle, up the Mississippi, connecting into the Ohio River, and then opening into this little region called, I guess, limestone at the time, and finding their ways and establishing and setting up, new civilization. So those were some of the people that actually were the early people that came through. I mean, the area is very rich in Revolutionary War history. The Revolutionary War, General Marquis de Lafayette actually had stayed at the Lee House at one point, and there is a guest registry of the Lee House from the early days, and that's in the Gateway Museum, which is only a couple blocks away from the Lee House in Maysville. There were very many people that actually came through. There was Henry Clay, Governor John Chambers, and the list goes on.
Wow. So you were interested, it's just sort of kind of a landmark property, and you decided that you got a little bit interested in the real estate aspect of it. And how did that happen? You just saw it, was it on the market, and you decided that might be a good investment, or the renovation and the historical aspects of how you bring that to the community has got to be something that drove you. But tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, my background is real estate accounting. I worked for one of the national CPA firms when I first got out of college. We handled every developer, real estate investor, pretty much, all over the country. We were like the premier firm for that. So I was never afraid of real estate. And I understood it. That just made it a little bit more interesting. I mean, this was the kind of the first thought. A lot of times people look at real estate and they look at it as aesthetically, they look at it historically, and they look at it from my perspective. I've been kind of trained to be able to look at it a little bit differently from the standpoint of maybe an investment. I knew this thing was going to require a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time, but I was young at the time when I did this, first started this, and thought that it would be kind of a great retirement asset. We visit every summer, and during the time that I wasn't visiting, I figured that I could put together a group of talented guys to handle all of the different things that were needed, and come up with something like trip plan to tackle certain areas, certain phases of whatever the restoration was. But yeah, I mean, it just, in the beginning, I looked at it, from all of those different angles. And then as I started to work with it, I really got more and more entrenched in the history of it and looked at it as just more than just an investment. It was really a part of history. It was really almost an honor to be able to have something like that and become a caretaker of it during the time that it was in our hands. And it was like a lot of times when you look at something, everything sort of ties to numbers, which it always does. But in this, sometimes decisions were made in order to be respectful of, the age of the building, the history and what it was. For example, we have when I first got the building, it was in trouble. It needed a lot of really big repairs to it. That just over years, you have to tend to the mortar, the brick and the mortar. The entire building had areas where the mortar was failing, and we had to do what's called tuck pointing, basically going back and having a crew of masons go through the building, find areas where we had loose, troubled mortar, soft brick, replace those things. And things that have to go back into, putting, the building, giving the building structural soundness is something like that. It's very foundational. It's if you don't fix the brick, you don't want to paint the building because it just doesn't do anything. It's just
right.
Like putting a Band-Aid on something that requires way more attention. So that was one of the first things we did. I remember early on when I bought the building. It was in the fall. It was the early fall, and we were getting into winter, and we realized there were some areas that really required that kind of attention. So I had to put a crew of masons together, and we had to work through the winter, and we had to, tint up the building or tint up areas around the building, blow in kerosene heat because the mortar cannot be put in and when it's cold. I mean, if it freezes, then it will never have a chance to really cure to the brick and do what it does. And there was a lot of stuff that in the very beginning had to do with a sense of urgency to really protect the building. Another phase of work that we did, that had to do with making a decision to take care of something that was part of the building was replacement of windows. Now, granted, this building is nearly 225 years old today, 222 years old. The oldest building, you start to have things that may have issues if they weren't maintained meticulously throughout the entire duration of ownerships that passed on from many years. Windows were made of wood back then. Today, no one makes sash windows. No one actually manufactures those. Everyone, you can go to certain places where, you can get, the popular vinyl type windows, but to get custom sash windows is something that requires, a fair amount of planning and having someone. I was fortunate in that I had an amazing master craftsman who committed to the project with me to come on board. We developed a shop, and we found 60 windows that required replacement, which meant that we had to go to a lumber mill, find the original stock that these are made out of was poplar, and then work something where we got the materials that we needed to make the restoration as pure as possible. And we did that. So we have windows that we constructed on site and did everything and build, and we got some great images. At some point we'll post those up, and you can actually see Pete at work in his shop, building windows for the restorations.
Well, great. It sounds like, it's like all of these kind of dream projects and stories have, team building is part of the huge aspect of finding the right people to make, preserve the story. I'm always coming at it from a story angle. So, if you change the windows, it changes the story, and it changes, you say some of these windows, some of these materials over the course of 225 years, I mean, that's a long time. So, you've got to take a lot of care with that. But the team building, and so, Ann, just coming back to team, I'm just going to flash forward to now, there's so much detail of the renovation, and I can see how Paul almost was coming at it from a numbers angle, from a real estate perspective, and was swept away by the story the way that I see it. I heard him over time talk about the materials and the mortar and the planning and the all of the construction, and but more and more came the historical aspect of the respect to the history. And so, would I be correct in saying that you are now the innkeeper at the Lee House?
I'm everything right now.
You're everything. All right.
But I am the keeper of this grand old home. Yes.
That's awesome. So part of what you do is bring the history to the community. Is that something that you do?
Well, yes, it is.
Well, you want to tell us about how you're doing that?
How am I doing that? Well, I sort of surprised Paul with that not too long ago, because I came on here and did some stuff, did some cleaning around here, brought it back up to where it needed to be. And I thought, wow, I'm getting this in such great shape. And we have Facebook, which is a great social media. And sometimes I just can't help but post things. So everybody sort of knew I was doing this down here. So I just put it on Facebook. I'm getting this already. I'm just opening it up for some tours. And bam, it just went crazy. Everybody has walked past this house many, many times, but with Paul being out there was never anybody to let them in. And that's what I'm going to do. It's time to open it up and show the beauty of this grand old building. Right. And that's where we're getting it to.
Wow. So, the Lee House is, just tell me a little bit about the, because I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression that it's like a house, like one house. It's an inn, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about sort of like if you were, putting in, if you had a 10-cent tour of the facility, like say how many rooms do you have, and you're close to the. One it was close to the water, right? Wasn't there a?
We are. There's a flood wall, and then there's a train track on the other side of the flood wall, and we're right on the Ohio River. Mm-hmm. And so we're in the old part of town. Downtown Maysville is very historic. And it's so historic that a good friend of mine from the Netherlands, she came here for a visit. And when she walked through our old town, she was just in awe because she said, this reminds me of a movie set. And that's what it looks like. It looks like a movie set. It's that historic.
Well, that's awesome.
And people will walk around town all night long. We have visitors from all over, and they're safe. You can walk in our downtown. It's safe to walk here. So there's a lot of people who walk past this house in awe, total awe. And it is not just a house, but it is a house. It is a big old house, but it's a grand, big old building that was built in 3 stages, correct, Paul?
That's correct, Ann.
It is. But this home, I'm going to tell you something, Keith. This house has a heartbeat, doesn't it, Paul? It has a heartbeat.
It does.
It has a grand heartbeat. Well, so it's time to let her shine. And that's what I'm going to do. It's time to let this grand old house just shine. And I sing this song to Paul a lot. There's a song that says, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. That's what this house is. It's a light. And it's time for her to shine.
So Paul, did you? That's awesome, Ann. That's awesome. Did you in the years that you've had this project and this, this is called a project. It's a project, and it turned into a passion, the way I see it, and it turned into. Does it turn into a kind of a responsibility at a certain point? Do you feel like
that to me? You asking me? I'm going to tell
both of you.
I owned a cleaning business here years ago, and I've cleaned. I had 28 to 30 employees, and I've been in a lot of homes, but I was never in this home. So I didn't know who Paul Joseph was, but one day I was driving past, and I've got a thing that if I want to see something, I just get out and ask, hey, can I go in there and see it? And the guy that was here, I knew him real well. And I stopped and I said, can I go in and just look around? And he said, sure. And that was the very day my passion for this house was. Had no idea. I didn't even know the history of it, It was just a passion. And every night I can drive home by this way of where this house is located, and I just drive past. It was just a love. It was a love of this home. And Paul, I don't think he really realized it until finally we made 2 ends meet. And now he knows the passion for this house for me.
I've been so fortunate. At the time when I was doing the building side of stuff, you always want to find the finest masons. You want to find the finest finished carpenters, and you want to find the best painters. You always want to find the best that you can find to help bring this place and this, the Lee House into a stage that kind of, is your vision. And now, as we've gone through the majority of the two of the buildings, we're now venturing and working on the oldest one, which will be the greatest one when we're all done with it. You're looking at the next things, the continued maintenance, and then the caregiving, and also the operations of an inn. And Ann came in. Ann first met one of my old managers. She was just referring to someone that she met, and she took the tour. I didn't know, but she had told me about it. But she met one of the old managers and went through the Lee House for the first time. And years later, and probably about 3 years ago, I met Ann. I had the privilege of meeting her, and she told me that, she introduced herself. I'm Ann Brammer, and I live across the street from one of your projects there in town. And she was the warmest and greatest person. Her heart, her spirit was pure and good. And her and her husband, Sonny, live right across the street from one of my buildings. And she said, you know what, you can do this. And if you need help, I can help you. I can help you do this. And I thought, a lot of times people say things that, yeah, you know what, I can do that. Or, well, let's get together. Let's meet tomorrow or whatever. And it never happened. So I kind of took it as being kind of a partially not even a committal or commitment. I just thought it was in passing and talking. But Ann was, probably as honest and pure and true that, hey, you know what, I can do a lot of things that can help you with this project. One of the biggest things that's really important when this whole thing is done is to have someone that has the eye, can take care of it, can manage it, can do all of the things that have to do with going from a completed space to being able to have it so that we entertain guests, take care of them, and meet them and make them feel like this is their home for the time that they're there. I can't tell you how proud I am of Ann and what she's done and what she continues to do in her work. She is probably one of the best people that have come into this whole vision and management of this grand old house. It was an inn back in the day, and it reverted into apartments as our lifestyles and things changed and owners made decisions. My vision was to take it back to an inn, which meant that it would be open to the public because it's a public space. Everyone should be able to go behind and feel that they have a part of history when they visit. And to know that Ann is there to be able to facilitate, one, making sure that the people that are cleaning the rooms are doing a great job. So half the time she's also, in there with them doing everything that needs to be done. But our rooms, we pride ourselves on having, rooms that are spotless and impeccable when it comes to detail and cleaning. That's really important to me. It's super important to Ann, and it's showing all the time. That's a big, big thing. To be able to make guests feel welcome. Ann certainly has great Southern hospitality. She's from the region, and she brings on, kind of like a warmth about her that I'm certain that every single one that comes through has an impression that I'll be back. And I thank you. I really do.
It seems like Ann's one of the things that's really important in my world and marketing, advertising, even filmmaking is a connection. You're making these personal connections with people, Ann.
I love people. I love people.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's it. I love people. I even like the bad people. You gotta love everybody, And took me a while to convince Paul. I told him, we've laughed about it. I said, don't let this gray hair fool you from now on.
That's right.
he's been talking about you, and I remember I pictured you, and I have to say you look exactly like I pictured you. Honestly.
Hey, hey, it's the truth. I've worked all my life, Keith. I'm not afraid of work. How many times have I told you, Paul? If you sit down, you'll die. I've got a lot of living yet to do. I'm not dying yet.
Yes.
Well,
So it took me a lot of convincing, and it was I helped him at the Hutchison's one time. He needed somebody to go up there and explain it. This is a great story, and this is the love story of a friendship that brought us together, truly. And I went up there and cleaned it. Me and Walena, a girl that works here for me. And I walked in and I thought, whoa, this doesn't have much in it, It's just the basic stuff. And so a fellow that works for Paul come up and would help me do things. And I just kept saying, there's not much stuff here. So I was asking him, because I know we have stuff stored in in rooms down here. So I was asking him sort of what was in the rooms. And he told me, and I said, well, let's go shopping at the Lee House. And so I had just redone my house, and I'm an antique lover. So most of the stuff that I didn't use anymore, I just sit back, because you never get rid of antiques. And so it went well with the Hutchison's building. It really did. So I put a little final touch here and a little touch there, and I hung beautiful drapes up at the windows, and I decorated more and stuff. And so I told Greg, I said, let's go down to the Lee House. Let me go shopping. So I brought a few things up. And so when I got done cleaning, I FaceTimed Paul, and I said, I'm done. And I didn't ask any if I could do that, Keith. I figured the worst scenario is he'd say, take it back. I'm okay. I got broad shoulders. I can handle all that. I'm tough, old bird. So Greg said, you think he wants you to take it up there? He said, he'll be okay. He'll be fine. So I brought it all up there and redecorated that. Pretty much that whole, added to it. Put a woman's touch to it. That's what I did. I put a woman's touch to it. And so I FaceTimed Paul, and I said, I'm done. And he said, well, good. And I said, would you like to see it? And he said, sort of in a voice like, I already know what it looks like. And I said, no, you need to see it. And so I FaceTimed him, and I said, are you ready? And he said, yeah. So I started scanning the room, and he said, where are you? And I said, oh, I'm at your other building up here. He said, where did all that stuff come from? And I said, well, some of it's mine, and some of it is yours. I said, actually, I went shopping at the Lee House. And I said, you know, the great thing about it was, and he said, what? And I said, I only spent $2.99. Is this correct, Paul? Am I telling you the truth? And he said, what did you do for $2.99? And I said, have you ever been to GW? And he said, no, what's GW? And I said, that's Goodwill. And I found a beautiful piece of pottery at Goodwill for $2.99. And that's all I spent on that. And so I said, now, if you love it, you love it. If you don't, I can undo it. I'm a matter-of-fact person. You can tell me whatever you think. Don't hurt my feelings. And so he loved it. So I thought, in my mind, Keith, I was thinking, please, Lee House, please. You know, and so, but I didn't say anything. So I got done, took all my cleaning stuff home, and then finally Paul called me, and he said, you know what? And I said, yes, the Lee House.
Yeah.
And so I've loved this house so many years. And I'm here, and I'm fortunate, and I'm proud.
That's awesome. So
you should be. It's amazing, you know. And you've just done an amazing job. You know, I mean, to be nearly 2,000 miles away, you know, on the other side of the country, it just is so reassuring knowing that the management isn't really good. You know, it really is. It makes a big difference in my own life.
It seems like you found a spark plug in Ann, you know?
Oh, I'm a spark plug anyway.
That's right.
I'm a spark plug anyway. I'm a time bomb, really.
Yeah. But we all need that. We all need someone to help. You know, a partnership. If you guys were both exactly the same person, those kind of things don't work. So you've got a good point and counterpoint. Paul will always keep your feet on the ground, but it's not afraid to take a little jump forward. And sometimes, kind of like me, I like to have people help me jump out there. You know, jump out.
You know what? I tell everybody to live by the seat of their britches. And I live by the seat of my britches.
That's awesome. Well, I hear you on that. So what is what I know we're in like a weird time in the world here, but have you done anything in particular with pandemic and anything like that? But you still have projects that are moving forward. You're not in any kind of paralysis there. How is that? Just because we're in that time? Is there anything that is going on in that regard for the Lee House because of the pandemic?
You know, we're very careful. We just had 6 interns with Bruce Carlson Software here in Maysville. Wasn't sure he was going to have them, but then he decided to do it. He has got a business that's international. He's all over the world. And he decided to bring these 6 students here. And it was my job to protect them, all. So we set up a little station out in the hallway. We had hand sanitizers. We had thermometers. We had Clorox wipes. We had it all. And I brought those kids here, and we assigned their rooms, and I protected them, and no one was allowed in this house. No one but me and the girl that cleaned. And so we're very careful, and we'll always be careful, but we're a rural community, very rural, even though we're a city, but we don't have as much corona as the bigger cities do. Yeah. But as a small community, we all come together and we wear our mask and we do the best we can do to protect one another, whether we know them or not. But I protected those kids, and they went home corona-free.
That's great. Yeah, because it's a small community. You don't have it. You don't want to. You keep it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, Ann's been very good. You know, we looked at standards to have in place for this time. And, you know, one of the things that's really important, and you see it all over, you know, cleanliness is a really big part of keeping things in the right environment so you don't allow opportunities for this virus to spread. And that's one of the things that's really big and really high on our list, you know, is cleanliness. And there's always someone cleaning there, doing something by way of cleaning, sanitizing, and, you know, having things that make the room special when you go in them. So, and we'll continue to do that. I mean, there's nothing better than being away from home and going to a place that, you know, just pretty much upon entry, you feel like, wow, I can stay here. And that's, you know, everything that we can do to keep our guests safe is what we'll do.
Top priority.
Priority. Absolutely, it has to be. There's no safety, there's no guests. So
yeah,
right.
There's so much more to talk about on the Lee House, but I know that one thing that you're doing, Paul, is you're launching a new website very soon, and we're trying to get more of the story of the Lee House out to the world. And I love talking to you about the Lee House story. And why don't you tell me a little bit about what's coming up in the next few weeks or months about launching those things and the storyline that you have for the rest of the year, basically. Yeah. And then what we'll do is we'll put all the information about the Lee House in when we for those of you watching the broadcast, we'll have all those links in our post here so that you can check Paul and check Ann and check out the Lee House. So tell us about what's happening like now. So we basically, this is time to promote the Lee House.
Yeah, well, we have a total of 5 rooms or 5 suites that we're putting out there, and we're learning how to do the next phase of owning this very well, and that's the putting it out there and having real people experience it and doing our best to make it so that they have comfortable stays. We take really good notes, and we do things to try to kind of improve on everything and making their experience, one that says, hey, what, I'll be back, I'll come back. So that's a big thing. And then in the process, we've also are developing our website that will kind of put us out there to be able to give people information on the history of the Lee House, and also to be able to see the rooms that we have available for guests to stay in. That'll all be out there. Things have changed a lot in terms of the bookings with this pandemic. We're taking precautionary measures. We just started making it so that we have gaps between stays, so we don't have guests coming in back to back. We'll have a room that we won't book it for 24 to 48 hours after someone leaves the room. It'll be cleaned and prepared for the next guest to come. But we're very proud of what we've done. I'm very proud of every aspect of it, the work that we're doing. I'm really proud of the people that we have when our guests stay, and our housekeeping that have done a remarkable job in keeping it, top notch and very clean. They're really going above and beyond. And yeah, the website is just kind of a way of being able to just even put the history out there. So even if someone doesn't stay, they can understand maybe a little bit more about the Lee House. And I'd be remiss in talking about the Lee House only without talking about the town of Maysville and Old Washington. They're two very beautiful areas. Maysville is really kind of like the city, and Old Washington is basically a historic district, which at one time was the county seat many years ago. But they have amazing architecture and history of old buildings and cabins and things that date back to the 17 and 1800s. That's still around, and they're great people that you meet along the way, and a great slice of different life than what I have on the West Coast. But it's it's fun. It's a great town. Just like Ann's, you see Ann's hospitality and her personality. There's a lot of that there,
right?
And it's great to see. So
geographically, just for those who don't know, say in Kentucky, where are you from? Recognizable.
Sure.
Where are you from? Cincinnati. Where are you from?
Yeah.
We're about an hour and 20 minutes from Cincinnati. We're right between Cincinnati and Lexington. Lexington's another big city. We're about an hour. We're right in the middle, so we could go either way.
So if you were going to fly in from the West Coast, do you fly to Cincinnati, Paul?
Yeah, most people fly in Cincinnati, CVG, yes.
Okay, just giving some people a kind of point of reference.
That's a bigger airport. Lexington's got a smaller airport.
Sure. Well, they call it in our marketing and advertising, we always call it a call to action. So why don't you tell us to come see us at the Lee House in Maysville, Kentucky.
Tell you, I'm a visionary. I have big ideas for next year. I have big ideas. Paul knows them. We have a lot of history. We have a lot of things to see, not per se do, but we've just got a lot of history in this area. But we would love to have people come stay at this grand old home and visit our history. We're a good old country folk. We love to see people. I like to see the streets of this downtown full. You know, Rosemary Clooney grew up here. And she sang here. And she had her first premiere at the Russell Theater. And when George Clooney, her son, our grandson, when he was here, he had one of his movies that he premiered here at the Old Opera Theater. And I'll say it like this. Rosemary's first famous song says, "Come on to my house, come on to my house." And I'm going to say this for the Lee House. Come on to my house. Come on to my house. Come see me.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, I am really, really grateful to have the both of you on from the Lee House. It was formerly called, I mean, just, am I right? Was it called the Washington House or something like that? Was it the Washington?
It was called the Hill House at one, yes, and the Washington House also.
Washington House, yeah.
Yeah, during certain times it had a different name, but the name that tends to stick is the Lee House. I think that was in honor and remembrance of the oldest building was constructed in 1798, and then a second building was constructed on Front Street around 1825, and then the 1850s, the West Wing was added.
Well, I thought I read somewhere that there was a man named Lee who owned it around in the 1840s area.
Yeah,
like that. And maybe that's where the Lee House came from. That's
right. It was Peter Lee. Peter Lee was the architect. Yeah, and he was the one who built it. I think the actual building or completion of the Front Street wing was around 1825, and he did own it into the 1840s.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. It's been around for a long time.
It has been around for a long time. So I want you guys to be looking at these links and checking out how beautiful it is. And there's this one particular rendering of the new Lee House, which is fantastic, the way that looks. And compared to what I really love is the old pictures versus the new pictures. It's just like, wow, what an incredible makeover, and but with respect of the original intent.
Yes.
So this is going to wrap up our $1 million story of the Lee House.
Now I gotta say one thing.
Please.
But Bubba welcomes everybody here too. Bubba, this is a big joke with me.
Oh.
This is Bubba. Can you see Bubba?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Bubba.
There's a whole story behind that.
There's a whole story about Bubba.
Well, see, that's you do exactly the perfect thing right there, because you want the audience to want to know more, and you certainly did it right there.
Oh, it's a great story about Bubba and Miss Howard.
Well, yeah, I know there's a lots of material to cover. Well, when you're around for 225 or 224 years, there's bound to be more. If there's not more stories, then it would be a boring place. So
yes, it would.
We don't have that problem here. So
and we keep making more stories, don't we, Paul?
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, there's just to tease the audience, there's this photograph that Paul showed me about someone, I think it was in Colorado, sent this picture
It's true.
of a woman sitting on one of the balconies at the Lee House. And she found it in a thrift store, antique store, or somewhere like that. And it had the Lee House, and it had, what was it, like 1890 something?
Approximate data, yes.
Yeah, and it's like, wow. And so that person found Paul, got that picture to Paul just to keep the historic content, not to destroy, it needed to be in the right place. So she got that back to Paul, and it was pretty cool, awesome story. So I'm speaking of calls to action. I'm going to tell everyone who's watching and made it to the end to check out Paul's links that we're going to put in here. Check out the Lee House. You can virtually experience the Lee House without going to Maysville, but when you do go to Maysville, you'll absolutely want to check it out. And so with that, I also want to encourage anyone who's not in the $1 Million Story Ninja Facebook group to join up right now. And you can see how Paul's vision and his connection with great teammates and team members along the way in construction and along the way in the spirit of people and connection with Ann here in Maysville, Paul here in LA, and of course Paul goes to Maysville to be there in person. But it's all about that connection. It's all about the team people. It's all about following your dreams and following your vision. So that's what I want to encourage all of you to do. And when we will have our next $1 Million Story series interview with another great $1 Million Story, you'll be the first to know. So thanks again, Paul. Thanks, Ann. And I hope you guys have a terrific day. All right?
Thank you, Keith. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.